much of a voice, so I'm going to try to avoid talking too much, but we do have a couple of good information items that I think we've been hearing about for some time through the TPP process. So I'll mainly rely on the presenters for those, but for the first item we have for action, we just have the approval of the agenda. And if anyone has any changes or suggestions for amendments, I will pause. Okay, we don't need a roll call on that. So with no suggested changes, I will approve the agenda as presented. We do have the February 13th minutes to approve. Hopefully everybody had a chance to take a quick look at those. Do we have a motion, or do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Chair, Howley, motion to approve.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Madam Chair, Kevin Roggenbuck seconds.
Thanks, Kevin. We have a, excuse me, a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, Jed, can you please take the roll?
Jorge Bernal, Anoka County.
Aye.
Dan Ruiz, Brooklyn Park. Drew Flummer, Carver County.
Aye.
Charlie Howley, Chanhassen.
Aye.
Gina Minico, Dakota County.
Aye.
Dan Patterson, Hennepin County.
Aye.
Bridget Reef, MAC. Patrick Boylan, Community Development. Joe Barbeau, Met Council, MTS.
Aye.
Patrick Haney, Metro Transit.
Aye.
Bria Fast, Minneapolis.
Aye.
Jessica Hayek, MnDOT.
Aye.
Innocent AO, MPCA.
Aye.
Kevin Roggenbuck, Ramsey County.
Aye.
Anton Jervy, St. Paul.
Aye.
Terry Dill, Scott County.
Aye.
Matt Fighton, Suburban Transit. Elaine Katsukos, Tab Coordinator.
Aye.
Sarah Allen, Washington County.
Aye.
Chris Hartzell, Woodbury. Chair, there were 15 ayes, no noes, and no abstentions.
Okay, thanks, Jed. The next item is just public comment on committee business. Is there anyone online that wishes to speak or have comments on the committee's business?
We had no registrants and no one's present.
Okay, thanks, Jed. So with that, we can move on to, like I said, we don't have any regular business items, but we do have two information items. The first one is the introduction to the highway system harms, impacts, mitigation, and priority study. And we have Bethany and Amy from staff who are going to present. Are you both here and ready to take that over?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Hello, everyone. My name is Bethany Brandt, and I'm a planner at the Council. I'm here today with an introduction to our highway system harms, impacts, and mitigation priority study, which we have been talking about for years through the TPP policy development process. So really, we wanted to start out by framing this project and really provide the background for why this project right now. And we know throughout our own work and our partners' work that there have been a lot of studies that quantify the benefits of highways. So we know that they have really catalyzed growth across the region and provided a wide range of economic benefits. But we also know that some of these highways have major impacts to the adjacent communities across the region, not just in the urban core. And we want this study to help us more completely understand the impacts that highways have and identify those tangible solutions to maximize the benefits of our investments. A brief overview of the project. We're going to start by exploring the history of the regional highway system development and some of those historical impacts that we know through the Reconnect Rondo and some of the I-35W work that's been done to date. We're really going to focus on connecting with people who were and are impacted by construction and operations of the highway system. And we'll use research, technical analysis, and engagement to identify those opportunities to do better with projects. And we do hope this project will advance a more full understanding of benefits and the burdens that come with the highway system. The process intends to use a robust community-based engagement and research approach, bringing in representational perspectives to build consensus. And we'll talk about some of those perspectives in some upcoming slides. But the outcomes we intend for this project include some interactive tools and project guidance for mitigation, performance measures to track progress, and then reports, articles, and presentations to share our findings. There are 6 key objectives for this study, and we really want to, throughout this work, elevate the lived experiences, highlight the research available, and gain a thorough understanding that contribute to the factors and outcomes across the region. We have 3 organizing concepts that we're approaching this work with. And the first one is just acknowledging that infrastructure is really complex, and understanding the impacts of projects is often complicated because one community's harm may come with benefits for another. So we have to untangle what those relationships are to understand the full story and then find those balanced ways of addressing competing needs across the region. We'll also be using a public health framework, which brings us helps us to look at the bigger picture of what contributes to a person's well-being. So we'll be using social determinants of health framework to organize those various factors that shape community outcomes. And then finally, we will be using a trauma-informed approach to engagement because a lot of the communities that we hope to connect with on this project have experienced systemic harm, and they have a long-lasting effect and some distrust in government. So we need to make sure that we're approaching this work with humility and empathy and a willingness to learn and show them that we're committed to making long-lasting change. The project schedule shows the 6 major elements, and this is a little bit outdated. We're waiting for an updated graphic. We kicked the project off in December of 2024 and have started a lot of the foundational elements, including research and engagement plans. Later this spring, we'll start reaching out to stakeholders and kicking off engagement efforts, and all of this work will be wrapped up in early 2027. To identify the harms categories, the approach we're taking is shown on the screen here. They'll be organized into categories, many of which we already know through existing research, and we'll build on that existing research and knowledge with additional literature reviews. Some of these harms, as shown on the screen, will have easy data sources for quantitative evaluation. Others will have to use qualitative evaluation methods. And then we'll develop a mitigation toolbox for each of these various harm categories, and then we intend to test that toolbox using pilot corridors across the region. Here we have listed or shown our engagement approach. And internally, we have a project management team that goes beyond MTS and includes experts from community development. We also have 3 committees or groups that we're convening for this work to guide the policy, the technical aspects, and the research aspects of the study. And then our external engagement will include working with community-based outreach community-based organizations to help us set up focus groups and listening sessions, as well as some online tools and translation materials. There's a little bit more detail for the 3 advisory groups shown here. The TAC will bring together topical experts in transportation, public health, economic development, and other topics as necessary to advise on the feasibility and applicability of harms and mitigations. The harms policy group will be using community-based organizations to provide policy guidance throughout the project. And then committee presentations will be bringing a lot of our findings back through our regular committee process and sharing what we're finding with this group and others. Part of those engagements include a research and equity panel, which is bringing together local and national experts on transportation, public health, engagement, and other topics to provide guidance on the research element of this project. And many of these folks have vast experience researching locally on the topics of highway harms. And this is our first presentation for this study. So we have a whole bunch of next steps, but in the immediate term, we'll be finalizing the engagement and research plan so we can start working on that, those elements in earnest. We've scheduled our initial committee presentations, which includes today. We'll be at TAC and TAB in April, and we're also meeting with the Council's Equity Advisory Committee and Transportation Committee. And then later in the spring, we'll start reaching out to folks for the committees to start meeting with our stakeholders. So I know that was a very brief overview of a very long study that we're about to undertake, but I do have 2 questions for the group today, focused on the harms categories. If there's anything generally that you think we have missed, we'd love to hear about that today so we can add it to our literature review. And then if you have community-based organizations in your part of the region that are working on community development or transportation, we'd love to know about them so we can add them to our list of partners to engage.
Thanks, Bethany. Can you go back to for that first discussion question? Are there any harm categories we missed? Can you just go back to that maybe so people, excuse me, have it as reference? Any committee members have any thoughts or ideas on harms that may be missing? Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could say more about connectivity and access and whether that's intended to cover social connectivity and the effects of, for example, white flight and, kids not going to the same schools anymore and kind of this bifurcation of society. And then on top of that, like the impersonal nature of private automobiles that are encouraged by the highway system, where people no longer are having those casual interactions. So yeah, I'm just curious what the intent of that is.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Dan. We are thinking about that in terms of that social connection. We also are thinking about it in terms of accessibility for all and accessibility in the way we use in transportation for access to jobs and those types of things. So we do have a framework of understanding reconnecting communities from the previous administration's work there in their discretionary grant programs and a lot of the work that Reconnect Rondo has done. So we do have that element. And then some of those broader societal changes about like the impersonal nature of cars and removing incidental connections with your neighbors is a little bit harder, but I do think that's something that we'll hear a lot from the engagement with our community partners. So I think that is all going to bubble up through this study.
Thanks.
Any other thoughts or questions? Innocent, I saw you turn on your camera. Go ahead.
Yes, Madam Chair, Bethany, doing the reconstruction of, I would say, sample I-95 or I-94, there were several minority businesses, especially those that were living in a Rounded neighborhood and Prospect Park neighborhood, that were destroyed or cleared off for the road construction. And I was just thinking, do you include looking at businesses, how the reconstruction of those highway or corridors affect business owned by people that live around those neighborhoods?
Yes, so this project is primarily being done through a consultant team. We do have one of the firms on the consultant team is their specialty is in economic analysis. And then, so we'll be using their work to discuss wealth building, small business impacts. And then a little bit harder is to connect to the actual people who were displaced, because obviously some of them are no longer with us in the region, or we just don't know their ties. But one of the existing references is the Reconnect Rondo's report that they did. So we do have some sense of what has happened, and we'll be continuing to build on that. But there are some limitations in the data to do that in our budget.
Thank you.
Dan?
Thank you, Chair. I have another one. Is opportunity cost something to consider? What could we have done with all the investment and money and effort had we not put it into the highway system?
That is a very hard question.
Indeed.
So I'm going to caveat this by saying this likely is going to be the first step, and we will likely identify areas where we need further research and evaluation. I think this opportunity cost might fall into a next step, but I do think when we talk about wealth building and home ownership and business starts, Ramsey County has done a great analysis on their business starts. I think some of that opportunity cost methodology might come out through that work. But in terms of saying if we took the highway construction and did something else with it, I don't think we're going to get there this study.
Sure, thanks.
Joe?
Thanks, Chair. Even though I'm a coworker, I haven't gotten too involved in this. So, is there, maybe this is covered in one of the little icons we're looking at, but sort of the equity or the costs related to vehicle ownership, maintenance, upkeep, and the impact on lower income households and just the overall equity impact of our highway base system, or is that a little out of direct bounds of what we're talking about?
That economic question is likely to come up in the housing and economy section and the work that Echo Northwest is going to do. There is a metric already, the housing and transportation cost, that we can pull from. So there are ways that we can incorporate that, and we likely will be incorporating that as part of the economic analysis.
Thanks. Charlie, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't know if it's a harm or not, and maybe this is in the connectivity and access category, but the idea of having choices, right? Like if building a highway limits me from riding a bike, or, having options. I want to walk, I want to bike, I want to take a train, I want to take a car, I want to do, having that choice of options. And is it a harm if you take away choices? This is more of just a brainstorm question than I think it's missing.
Yes, I think we've heard a lot through our other engagement work about lack of choice, particularly outside of the urban core, which is well served by transit and has made extensive investments in bike facilities as redevelopment has occurred. And I think we hear that in the suburbs because they often lack that choice or their perceived choices. And so that certainly will come up in a lot of these places. Accessibility is another example of lack of choice. We may provide an accessible pedestrian overpass, but if you have to go up the corkscrew and across and you have a big grade and then down the corkscrew, are you physically able to do that? Maybe not. So choice is going to look differently, or it's going to look different depending on the category that it falls into.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Related to that, I mean, it's not, I don't think, just the provision of facilities, it's also where the destinations are. The highway system kind of spread out the destinations. So now we have a few bigger box options such as Target, and it's drained out the economic activity from places that would have been accessible to people in places that are of a scale that is pedestrian or bicycle accessible. Yeah, I just wanted to add that into the mix. Thanks.
Yeah, I think land use form is certainly a component of the placemaking and sense of place piece. So certainly a topic that we'll probably hear from, and that we do often hear from youth that we engage, is they're not old enough to drive, or maybe they can't afford a car and they are kind of stuck at home. So I think you're onto something there as well.
Actually, Bethany, if I might add something in here and maybe generate a little more conversation. What I'm hearing in some of these questions is a little bit of balancing. We have been thinking of harms of being a little bit very specific, to communities directly adjacent to the highway facilities, right? And what harms have they experienced? But some of the questions today raise almost a system level harm, like, the whole system has changed our land use patterns and how we've developed, and some opportunity cost in there that I think we haven't really explored with our consultants yet to really talk about. And maybe that's a follow-up step too, that we had really been envisioning this more about specific corridors and what are the harms that the communities that live adjacent to these corridors have experienced over the years. But I do think there's a good question in here about system level harms, and could the region have been better off in some aspects, and how do you quantify and think about that system level impacts too? And then, as long as I have the floor, I would add one other aspect that doesn't really appear on here, and it's probably more in the mitigation toolbox piece of this, but throughout the discussion of harms, we're also going to be talking about how do you mitigate these harms, and a piece of that is how do we pay for it, and whose responsibility is it to pay for mitigation. We're all familiar with our transportation funding and having limitations on how we can spend transportation funds. How has that played into the fact that we haven't mitigated some of these harms? When you have funding sources that don't allow you to spend on non-highway purpose, that clearly inhibits our ability to mitigate the harms that are coming along with these systems. So that's going to be buried in both what are the harms and how do you mitigate it, and how do we use the funding that's available.
Thanks, Amy. Those are really good points. Ethan, it looks like you've had your hand up for a while, and I think we maybe lost one other commenter, but go ahead. Maybe the other person will come back.
Hi, Ethan Buss, by the way. I'm VTA, just filling in for Matt Fighton today. Just wanted to mention mental health as well. I know, health is already on there, but just making mental health notable, and also just like the stresses of driving and the stresses of living near highways could be just an aspect of health.
Yeah, thank you for that. We talked about that extensively yesterday. So
Thanks. Drew?
Hi, I came back. I was sort of thinking about something that ties into, I believe, Dan's comment about the opportunity cost. But it's not just the opportunity cost of what we could have spent the money on and we didn't. There's the opportunity cost of what we lost as well. Not just in terms of obviously ramming the interstate system through neighborhoods and displacing tens of thousands of people, but things like a quick, reliable, cheap transportation system of streetcars. That are effectively silent-ish and could move an entire street worth of people. So I think part of the harms has to be, in my mind, talking about what we had at one point. And every transit agency in America is sort of trying to rebuild what we had.
yeah, thank you for that. That's certainly a new way of thinking about opportunity cost. And yeah, if we have to rebuild a system that we pulled out for a new system, that probably is a financial harm in the long term.
Any other thoughts or comments? Did anyone have any thoughts? There was another discussion question that was posed related to community-based organizations that we should engage. Although I don't want to cut off if anybody else had any further discussion on this. I think I just saw a hand, but if not, we'll move on to see if anyone has any thoughts on the community-based organizations. But if folks want to still talk about this, I don't want to stifle that conversation if somebody did have their hand up. Maybe not. Yeah, does anyone have any thoughts on community-based organizations that should be engaged? Maybe, Bethany, is there a list anywhere of ones that you are already engaging with or have as part of the committee's structures? The committee structures, I mean.
Thank you, Chair, for that question. We do not have a fully vetted list yet. We have a brainstorm list that we're adding to as we go through these committee presentations. So I think any and all are on the table. Especially for folks, for some of the smaller communities in the exurbs or more rural parts of the region, we would really love to hear from those folks. And they're a little bit less connected to our typical processes too. So any ideas, you can feel free to send them to Amy and me after this meeting too. If there's a list within your agency, we are very much trying to spread our engagement across the region as much as we can.
Charlie?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Are chambers of commerce on the list for community organizations? And if not, they probably should be.
We have quite a few of smaller chambers of commerce across the region that we've identified. So some, but not all, are on the list.
Thanks. I think Innocent was next.
Madam Chair, Bethany, yeah, I would like to send send some list of organizations for outreach. I know within Rondon neighborhoods there are several organizations within that neighborhood. You know, if we talk about Rondon neighborhood, looking at the past or what happened there, then you still have people that were deeply involved in those days. They were affected, and current people that moved to that neighborhood, and different African American groups, Asians, Hispanic, and so there are a lot of groups within those that we will need to probably engage, and also looking at the Prospect Park neighborhood or Phillips Whittier neighborhood for I-35W. So there are several organizations within those communities that could try and send the list so that may be included for some of the future engagement.
Yeah, thank you for that. I know we have a couple of the Rondo area groups identified, and we do have the East Phillips neighborhood identified, but I did not have Prospect Park on my radar. So thank you for that.
Bria?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In Minneapolis, I just wanted to put in a plug for the Cultural Wellness Center as well. They've played such a critical role in a lot of our transportation and specifically transportation equity work here in the city.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
I might add in here too, I see a need to balance a little bit on this community-based organizations. Again, groups that have worked directly along corridors where harms have been experienced, but now this thinking about groups that have thought about this at a system level or kind of broadly about these issues. And we are trying to emphasize getting groups that have had some involvement in transportation. It just takes a long time to bring people up to speed. And so already having groups that have had some experience is something we're looking for too. So if you've worked with some group on a transportation project that's been actively involved, letting us know, that would be really helpful.
One question I have is, and maybe you said this in the beginning, is it primarily around freeways conversions, or are like higher capacity PAs, maybe non-freeway PAs also on the table?
Yes, the scope includes all principal arterials, so interstate and non-interstate principal arterials. So there are more of those than we thought in the region. And so a lot of representation from everyone's county will be on full display. So.
Thanks. Any other questions or discussion? Kevin.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. I had a kind of a process question. I understand how you get to the study approach and how you get to a mitigation toolbox. Can you elaborate more on what you would do in testing the toolbox on pilot corridors?
I think we would look, that part of the research plan is not well defined at this point. But what I can say is that we would likely take a corridor and say, there are these 3 primary harms. What are the mitigation strategies for each of those harms? And then bring it to community and to our policy groups and technical groups and say, do you think this would actually mitigate to the condition you're looking for or not? And some of these will have to be like quick build projects, and I'm going to let Amy step in for this as well.
Yeah, one of the things we've been thinking about on this project, and I think Gina was kind of getting there with her question about which highways. The highways we're talking about come from different histories, right? Like some of these highways existed in some form, and over time they've kind of morphed into freeways. We've kind of, done a project here, project there. So it's been like this slow motion to becoming a freeway. We have other freeways like 94 where we came in and we bulldozed through neighborhoods and built a facility and really changed the whole community in doing so all at once, kind of. And then we have other freeways where we did a lot of planning. We laid them out on official maps. We built them maybe more thoughtfully. But even those freeways have some level of harm that they're causing to adjacent communities. So I think what we're kind of thinking about is categorizing the freeways themselves into buckets and then testing out, do the harms look like, are they experiencing different harms depending on how this highway was conceived and developed and created over time? And then do the mitigations look different based on that type? And we don't know the answer to that. Maybe it'll be broadly, yeah, everyone's unique and you have to look at each one differently, or maybe we can make some broad conclusions about the types of harms based on the type of facility and then also the mitigation that's appropriate. So until we delve in and really start thinking through that, we don't know the answer, but that's why we're testing it out by corridors, and those corridors will represent different types of situations across the region.
All right, thank you. I'm thinking too, there's a lot of probably experience and data out there about things like noise walls and other kinds of natural plantings and other things like that. So there might be some good data already out there that you could use and don't have to start from scratch necessarily.
Thank you for that.
I just have a question. Have you guys seen this done in other regions or other places? It seems like pretty new territory from where I sit, although I'm not always paying attention to the national conversation. Like, do you have a model you're going off of, or was this kind of all developed internally?
As far as we can tell, this is the first of its kind study. So we're a little bit ahead of the curve, maybe. However, there have been a lot of these types of studies individually on air quality, noise, specific limited elements of this study. But this is, as far as I can find, the most comprehensive approach to doing this work. So there are a lot of good research sources we can build on, but nothing to model after.
Yeah, and I would add, we don't want this study to be thought of as kind of a theoretical research effort, though. The real driving force behind here is to start thinking about investment and how you invest in mitigation. And so while we don't have a lot of research background or similar things that have occurred, even if they had, I'm guessing they wouldn't have pushed it to the point of, okay, then how should we be investing? How should we be using our funding to mitigate the impacts of these facilities? And that's really the primary outcome we're trying to get to, is how can we invest to mitigate?
Great. Thank you. I assume there will be more to come as this develops, and that we would be one of the committees you guys come back to at various steps. So yeah, it sounds like a really comprehensive and innovative look at things. So thank you for bringing it to us. Any final comments before we move on to the next one? All right. Thank you, Amy and Bethany.
Thank you.
So next on the agenda, I believe we have Steve Elmer. I just need to pull it up here. Who's going to discuss the Regional Bicycle Transportation Network, the RBTN, and Regional Bicycle Barrier update process. Steve, are you ready? Looks like you're ready. Thank you.
Yep. A little better with the computer logistics today than in previous meetings, but yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, committee members. So the purpose of my presentation today is really just to kind of bring up on your collective radar these upcoming opportunities to request changes to the RBTN and also to our regional bicycle barriers. And so beginning with the RBTN. Oh, hang on. Got to get to, I spoke too soon. There we go. No. Yep. Beginning with the RBTN, just want to give you, a little bit of history on our RBTN updates. We had back in 2021, a new process was developed to really consider major updates to the RBTN ahead of the 2022 regional solicitation. And before 21, we mainly considered more minor administrative changes. We did allow for some new corridors and alignments with based on discussions and interactions with our agency stakeholders. But these had to be evaluated qualitatively. So we determined that we needed a set of quantitative measures to facilitate reviews of our proposed RBTN additions and extensions. Thus, we developed and conducted the RBTN Guidelines and Measures study through most of 2020 and completed in early 2021. And this study developed evaluation measures to allow a greater flexibility in considering a broader range of changes, such as RBTN route extensions, route additions, or spatial adjustments. And so a set of measures was developed for corridor spacing, for route directness, system connectivity, social and economic equity, and proximity to development or activity nodes. And so I'm not going to get into the details of those evaluation criteria today, but we can report on those specifics at an upcoming TAC planning meeting. Next slide, here we go. So through this process, for agencies that wish or to consider requesting an update, they would be reviewing our RBTN corridors and alignments within their community or adjacent communities on the Council's interactive online map. And Agencies will have options to propose several types of change, including adding a new RBTN corridor or alignment, requesting a shift of an existing RBTN corridor, center line or alignment, or extending an existing RBTN corridor or alignment. So this lays out the steps kind of at a high level for application review and approval of change requests. The first step is that we would publish notification of an open period to propose RBTN changes. And so we'll publish that on our Met Council website and then distribute widely via email. And then upon receiving the requests and applications, the council staff will review all of them and evaluate them based on our RBTN evaluation measures that I mentioned earlier, and develop a set of staff recommendations. And then we would meet with and consult with our bicycle pedestrian planning work group to review our recommendations and finalize the recommendations to either approve or deny each specific proposed update. And then we would take the final recommended changes through our TAC tab process to be accepted along with the approval to release the draft 2026 regional solicitation packet for public comment. And then there's an additional step for incorporating into the TPP. Basically, we take the final updated RBTN map and present that for approval by TAB and then Met Council for inclusion in the 2050 TPP as an administrative modification. So it does have that extra step to make it official. And then this is just a general timeline here, and we're targeting May 1st to publish notification of the proposed RBTN changes, and then that would be the start of the open period for making change. And back in 21, when we did this major update the last time, I believe we gave agencies 5 weeks to respond, and we're thinking here of extending that to 2 full months. So that would give us a target of June 30th deadline to submit the change requests. And then basically the month of July, we at council staff will review the applications, come up with our staff recommendations, and then these future items, these future steps I mentioned, the dates to be determined, and it's nothing set in stone yet, and we need some more internal conversation on that, but we'll be determining that over the next several weeks. So that's what I wanted to talk about, kind of a brief update or overview of our process. And some of you are very new to this and might have questions, so maybe we could pause here to see if there's any questions or if people need additional information.
Thanks, Steve. Any questions? Ben?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Steve, I'm with Ramsey County, and with anybody representing a county, it includes a number of cities. Is there any kind of requirement for coordination with cities within a county for counties to make comments? Because you might get conflicting choices, or we might propose something in St. Paul and St. Paul doesn't. So how would you kind of sort those out?
Thanks for your question, Kevin, Madam Chair. Well, it's a good question. I guess it has come up before, but if there's a question on consistency or continuity with plans of an adjacent jurisdiction, we would kind of raise that back to the proposing agency to kind of get answers to those questions, I would imagine, and but no official process is envisioned. We're really trying to, for the most part, we're really looking at, kind of what you're connecting to. And if there's an extension that needs to connect into another jurisdiction, then that would be a key case where you'd want to kind of do that pre-discussion with the adjacent jurisdiction about how that might be planned and accommodated.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Steve, thanks. I think, did you say that the timeline was expanded this time compared to last?
Yeah, we would have potentially here, if we're targeting May 1st, on or about May 1st, we get 2 full months. So that might be 9 weeks. I don't know, 8 or 9 weeks of time. And so 60 days, basically, 61 days. And last time I believe was 5 weeks. So it is an extension, though I don't think anybody complained about the length of time last time. So
I'll say I appreciate it. I think we maybe ran ours by our board before we submitted ours, and that always can take a while just to get through the agenda submitting process. So for anyone that might want to do that, or like Kevin mentioned, I think we did reach out to our cities. Maybe it wasn't a formal process, but just as a heads up. So I appreciate the extra time and the early heads up that this is coming. Any other thoughts or questions on this at this point? Okay, go ahead, Steve, continue on.
Thank you. Okay, so for regional bicycle barriers updates, we also did this back in 21 and maybe even more recently. So I'll start with some history on that. These regional barriers are the product of the process we went through during the regional bicycle system study. The original study was done in 2017, and then it was updated in 2019. The original regional bike barriers were introduced into the Transportation Policy Plan through the 2018 TPP update and defined as the region's most significant physical barriers to daily bicycle travel. Specifically, they were defined to include freeways and expressways, railroad corridors, and secondary and third order rivers and streams. And a further definition for expressways was that they should include highways with 4 or more lanes divided by a center median with posted speeds of at least 45 miles per hour. And for the secondary and third order streams, those are the streams and rivers that flow directly into the Mississippi, Minnesota, and St. Croix rivers, and the tributaries to those secondary rivers and streams. So those are the definitions. They've been established in the TPP. And then along with the regional bicycle barriers, and also included through the regional bicycle barriers study, were these definition of barrier crossing improvement areas. These are also introduced into the TPP in 2018 and updated again in 2020. And it was first added as an alternative scoring criterion in combination with the regional barriers for the 2020 regional solicitation for the multi-use trails and bicycle facilities category. And so these bicycle crossing areas, which are the circles you see on the right hand in the map on the right, define our prioritized segments along each barrier type, and these indicate where future improvements may most be needed. So the process is kind of similar to the RBTN process. Agencies wanting to consider updates would review the regional bike barriers as well as barrier crossing improvement areas within their communities by reviewing our online interactive map, a different map from the RBTN map. And then agencies will have the options to add a new regional bicycle barrier consistent with the definitions I described, as well as the potential of adding a new planned bicycle facility improvement location that crosses the regional bicycle barrier but is not currently included within one of those prioritized regional bike barrier crossing areas. So basically, if I go back to the last slide, if you're considering improvements, you can't see my pointer. If you're considering improvements, they would not be included in any of these circles along these barriers. It would be, maybe adjacent to a circle that you wanted included, and those could be added if they cross the barrier at those locations. And a more specific definition here is that these planned regional bike barrier crossing improvement locations must be described or mapped in an adopted local bike or transportation plan or an adopted study, or be an improvement project, a planned improvement project in a capital improvement plan. And that's very similar to the qualitative criteria we use for the overall regional solicitation. So these are the steps again for application review and approval. These are mostly identical to the ones I described for the RBTN. We'll have notification of an open period to request the changes for either regional bike barriers or the adding a planned barrier crossing location. Council staff will review these updated requests based on how consistent they are with the stated barrier definitions. And then for new planned crossing improvement locations, we would determine a priority tier or recommend a priority tier for the new location based on its location relative to other existing and prioritized barrier crossing improvement areas. We'll bring those staff recommendations to the bike pad planning work group to arrive at final recommendations to accept or deny the proposed updates, and then present the recommended changes through TAC tab again to be accepted with the draft 2026 regional solicitation packet. And then that final step as well for the administrative modification to make it officially incorporated into the 2050 TPP. So basically the same steps, and then the timeline is exactly parallel to the one for the RBTN updates, as I described earlier. So yeah, well, that's all I wanted to present today, but again, I'll stand for any questions or comments.
Thanks, Steve. Any questions or comments from the committee? All right, I don't see any. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate the information. We'll give our folks a heads up that this is coming, so we'll be ready on May 1st if we need to make any changes. That, I believe, concludes our regular agenda. Let's pull it back up. So the only other item is other business, and I do believe Joe had an item on other business he wanted to bring forward. Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. You might recall last week I sent out an opportunity for participation in the regional solicitation and evaluation special interest working groups to provide technical recommendation to policymakers related to eligibility, criteria, measures, etc. It would be 4 meetings, 2 virtual and 2 in person. Those in-person meetings we know will be on the 25th of April and the 30th of May. And we're hoping for about 12 people up to, or so up to each working group. And honestly, we're not that far behind, so we're not in any real trouble or in any position to be begging necessarily. Although if you are interested in TDM or equity, that would be probably the where we're lacking a little bit the most. But if you got that and haven't seen it, please remember to sign up. If you want, I can resend the email. That's really all I have. We'll be hearing plenty about this project in the coming months.
Thanks, Joe. Maybe could you resend the email out? I know there's been a lot of emails about this in general, and I maybe not remember. I know you sent this one, but just so that it's fresh in everybody's inbox. Especially, did it have you mentioned some dates in there for the in-person meetings?
Yeah, they were mentioned there. I can do that again. I can
okay. Yeah. Sorry, maybe I just missed it. Thanks.
Yep.
Does anyone else have any other business or announcements for the committee? Okay, seeing none. Thanks everybody for your participation today. I will adjourn the meeting and we will see you next month. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.